As Jessica sat in the living room, dressed for her father's funeral, she really couldn't understand why she was dressed and why she was going in the first place. Her mother had made it seem like a good idea at the time, but now it was all coming around, and she really had some pretty significant questions. Jessica's dad had really never been a part of her life. He left very early on, started a new life, a new family, never seemed to have any regrets. But now, it was all said and done. For some odd reason, Jessica and her mother Meredith were going to his funeral. And so when Meredith, Jessica's mom, came in to ask Jessica if she was ready, she said to her mom, "I just don't think I can do this. I don't think I can go. He never cared about us, never was there for us, so why should we go to his funeral? Why are you going, Mom, in the first place?" And Meredith sat down beside her daughter and said, "I'm going, Jessica, because I've forgiven him." And then she looked back at her mother and said, "I just don't know if I can." You know, it's really easy to talk about forgiveness, isn't it? It's really easy to tell someone else that they should forgive somebody. But when it comes down to us forgiving someone, it gets a little bit harder, doesn't it? Especially if that person seems to have no regrets or no feelings of remorse about what they've done to you. And that feeling that it's hard to forgive, that there's a sort of boundary to what we can forgive, a limit to how far we can go, doesn't make us bad people. It just shows us that as human beings, there are some things that are really hard to forgive. And the good news that we hear today as we read the Passion of Jesus according to St. Luke is that in God, specifically in Jesus as he goes to his execution, we see that there is no limit to God's forgiveness. There is absolutely nothing that God can't forgive. Now, whenever we read one of these accounts that we find in one of our four Gospels about Jesus' execution, his crucifixion, we have to ask ourselves a question. Why was Jesus crucified? Why was he killed in this specific manner? And there's a really good reason for that. Jesus wasn't just a regular guy. He was a teacher, a healer, a prophet. He had disciples. He had a movement. He had a following. So when the leadership of Jerusalem and the elite wanted to take him out of the picture, they couldn't just go off and kill him. It was a very volatile time in Jerusalem at that time, and if they had just done that, it would have incited a riot, and his followers would have galvanized, and they would have been there to take up his ministry right after he was gone. So what the chief priest and the elders had to do is they had to get rid of Jesus in some way that would disgrace him. He had to have a falling from grace. His public image had to be destroyed. That way, he would die, and his followers would just disintegrate. The movement would be gone, and they'd go back to their ordinary lives and just consider that a time they were reckless in their lives. Now, in the Roman Empire, in the first century, there was one way, one surefire way, that you could kill somebody and destroy them publicly. And that was crucifixion. And that's why Jesus was crucified. And that's why you see the various things happening to Jesus throughout this account. That's why he's mocked. That's why he's tortured. That's why he's stripped naked. That's why his trial doesn't seem like much of a trial. No evidence is really presented. They just try to get him to say something so they can use it against him. A little bit of yellow journalism, if you will. And that's why we see everything happen to him. This was the way that they were going to get rid of Jesus and destroy his image publicly, therefore silencing his disciples and putting an end to the Jesus movement all at once. Now, unfortunately for the chief priests and elders, it didn't work. And that's why Luke is retelling this story. He wants to show us that it backfired, that their attempt to publicly destroy Jesus' image, to to disband his disciples and to kill his movement did not work at all. And the reason that it didn't work is because Jesus never broke from who he was. He always stayed in character. As the politicians say, he stayed on message. He never, ever stopped being who he was called to be. And we see this clearly, and Luke really wants to highlight this, in the way that Jesus, throughout the whole thing, is forgiving people. He's forgiving the very people who are crucifying him, who are trying to strip him down and tear away everything that he's worked for. I mean, we hear it clearly in the reading in chapter 23, verse 34, when he says, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." But Jesus doesn't stop there in Luke's telling of the story either. Even one of the criminals who was being crucified with him, who asked for forgiveness, Jesus extends forgiveness to him as well. Which shows us that in Jesus, there truly is a divine forgiveness present. And it's a different kind of forgiveness than we have here on earth. It's a forgiveness that has no bounds and no limits. And that's because God's love is infinite and limitless. And that's why Paul can confidently say in his letter to the Romans that nothing can ever separate us from the love of God. Now, in light of this, I'd like to share a little bit of a personal story with you that some of you might know, and some of you might not know. And that is when I first started going through the ordination process back in 2008, I was turned down, actually. The bishop I was under at the time told me they didn't feel I was ready to be a priest at that time. And, you know, it hurt. It was a big rejection for me. It was a big rejection for my family. It was a big rejection for the community that put me forward. But in the end, several years later, I can see that it was a good decision. Because while it caused me a lot of suffering and pain and anguish, it made me a better man, and it made me a better priest in the long run when that journey finally came to fruition. But at the same time, even though I know it was a good decision, even though I know it was the right decision, I will admit there are days when I still can't let it go. Even though I say I've forgiven the bishop for making what was the right call, some days I don't forgive him. Some days I still take it personally. And I'm sharing this with you today because I'm fairly certain all of you have something just like this in your life as well. We all have one of those things that's happened to us, and we've forgiven that person, we've let it go, but every once in a while it rears its head, right? It comes back, it causes anger, sadness, whatever. We feel it all over again. And it's in that moment where all that stuff comes coming back that I am so glad that we have a God that forgives like he does. Because in those moments, God can help us take that extra step that we really can't at that moment. God can forgive the things that we sometimes can't forgive. God can help us let go of the things that we sometimes can't let go of. God can help us lay to rest all the burdens that we carry with us. When sometimes we just want to keep and hold on to them, because we're afraid if we let them go, something will happen. We don't know what will happen, but we're afraid of taking that next step. So as Meredith sat there with her daughter, she let her know that it's okay. She didn't have to go to her father's funeral. That she couldn't come to terms with it right now, that was okay. She didn't have to forgive him, not till she was ready. But she did tell her that if she did go, she feels like it would be something that she would never, ever regret. I am constantly humbled by the depths of people's love and compassion for one another. I am always put in just awe of how people can forgive each other, how people can let things go and heal from the things that have been done to one another. Yet despite all those depths of love and forgiveness that I witness on earth, I know, because I see it within my own self, that sometimes we just can't let certain things go. Sometimes it's pretty hard to forgive. And the good news that we hear today in the reading of Jesus' passion, of his crucifixion, his execution, is that through Jesus we see that we have a God where nothing is impossible to forgive. We have a God of deep love and compassion that can help us forgive the things that we really struggle to forgive. And a God that, no matter what we do or think we have done, has forgiven us for those things as well. And that's why I feel like our reading today, though morbid, and though talking about someone's death, in essence, really is great news, because it shows to us how much God truly loves us, his creation. Amen.